Hey guys, let's begin. This is the last video on the part of the IMAT inheritance and environment, and after that I will start posting videos about chemistry and about the physiology and anatomy part of the IMAT. So let's get started right away. Today we're going to talk about natural selection. I'm sorry. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about fitness and selection pressure, two terms we are going to use in order to understand natural selection. So let's get right into it. Fitness is the capacity of an organism to survive and transmit its genotype to its offspring. Blah, 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 blah. I didn't understand a single word. So let's try to explain that. Let's say I want you to imagine a population of rabbits, okay? Now, all the population of rabbits are not the same, all the rabbits. They have some traits that are different, that vary. So one feature that may vary is coat color. Most rabbits have alleles which give the normal brown color, which is called agouti or agouti. I have no idea. A few, however, may be homozygous for the recessive allele, which gives white coat. You see, the white rabbits will stand out distinctly from the others and are more likely to be picked out by a predator, such as a fox. They are less likely to survive, therefore, than agouti brown rabbits. The chances of a white rabbit reproducing and passing on its alleles for white coat to its offspring are very, very small. So the allele for white coat will remain very rare in the population. The term fitness now is often used to refer to the extent to which organisms are adapted to their environment. Or fitness is the capacity of an organism to survive and transmit its genotype to its offspring. Now, predation by foxes is an example of selection pressure. Selection pressure increases the chances of some alleles being passed on to the next generation and decrease the chances of others. In this case, the alleles for the brown coat have a selective advantage over the alleles for white. The alleles for brown will remain the commoner alleles in the population, while the alleles for white will remain very rare. The alleles for white coat may even disappear completely, because all the white rabbits will be killed by predators, because they will be distinct, they will be easily found by foxes. The effects of such selection pressure on the frequency of alleles in a population is called natural selection. Natural selection raises the frequencies of alleles conferring an advantage and reduces the frequency of alleles conferring a disadvantage. Now, if we wanted to give a definition for natural selection, it would be the differences in survival and reproduction among individuals, here I am, in a population as a result of their interaction with the environment. In other words, let me say it again because I want you to understand what is natural selection. Some individuals possess alleles that generate traits that enable them to cope more successfully in their environment than other individuals. The more successful individuals produce more offspring. Superior inherited traits that are adaptations to the environment and increase an individual's fitness. What is fitness? The relative ability to survive and leave offspring. So when the environment favors a trait, that is, when a trait increases the survival of its bearer is the one who bears the trait. Okay. Selection is said to act for that trait. In contrast, selection is said to act against unfavorable traits, like the white color. Selection acts against and reduces what? The frequency of alleles in the population. Favorable traits are adaptive, while unfavorable traits are maladaptive. So let's see now Darwin's theory of natural selection. He presented his theory for evolution by natural selection using the following arguments. First of all, he says that population possesses an enormous reproductive potential. That means that if there are no selection pressures, we have a very high population, an enormous amount of animals in the population of this. Let me give you an example. He calculated that 2 elephants would produce a population of 90 million individuals after 750 years if all offspring survived to reproductive maturity and fostered their normal number of offspring. Then he said that population sizes remain stable. He observed that populations generally fluctuate around a constant size depending on the animal. Resources are limited. What resources? Food, water, or light do not increase as population grow larger. That means that individuals compete for survival and have a struggle for existence. So eventually the needs of a growing population will exceed the available resources and individual must compete for the resources. Now, there is variation. Now, we're said that individuals compete for survival. Who wins? Who survives? If all were the same, who would survive? But all are not the same. So there is variation among individuals in a population, the number 5, and unequal ability of individuals to survive and reproduce. So most traits reveal considerable variety in their forms. In humans, for example, skin, hair, and eye colors occur as continuous variation from very dark to very light. Okay. Now, he said that much variation is heritable. That is what? That most traits are produced by the action of enzymes that are coded by DNA. DNA is a hereditary information that is passed from generation to generation. So this contrasts with characteristics acquired during the life of an organism. The amputation of a limb, for example, is not heritable. And then natural selection is that only, the most important one I believe, is that only the most fit individuals survive and get to pass on their traits to offspring. This is what is called survival of the fittest, and it occurs because individuals with traits best adapted for survival and reproduction are able to outcompete other individuals for resources and mates. And now Darwin said that evolution occurs by natural selection. So evolution occurs as favorable traits accumulate in the population. The best adapted individuals survive and leave offspring who inherit the traits of their parents. In turn, the best adapted of these offspring leave the most offspring. Over time, traits best adapted for survival and reproduction, and the alleles that generate them accumulate in the population. If you remember last time, we said what evolution is. What is evolution? Is the changes in allele frequency. You see that a result of natural selection is what? Change in allele frequency. And what alleles have the higher frequency and get to raise their frequency all the time? The alleles that code for favorable traits, who gives the most fit individuals. Now there are many kinds of selection, and we're going to see one by one, and I'm going to give you examples, but I have not written them down because I don't think you should know them. I will just talk about them. But before we get there, let me tell you how the giraffe got its long neck. According to Darwin's theory, ancestral giraffes were short-necked animals, although neck length varied from individual to individual. As the population of animals competing for the limited food supply increased, the taller individuals had a better chance of surviving than those with shorter necks. Over time, the proportion of giraffes in the population with longer necks increased until only long-necked giraffes existed. And this is evolution and natural selection, how evolution happens, occurs through natural selection. And now let's get on to the kinds of selection. First of all, we've got the stabilizing selection. The general theory of evolution is that organisms have changed over time. Usually, natural selection keeps things the way they are. This is stabilizing selection. Brown rabbits are the best adapted rabbits to survive predation, so the brown allele remains the most common color allele in rabbit population. Unless something changes, then natural selection will ensure that this continues to be the case. So what is stabilizing selection? It eliminates individuals that have extreme or unusual traits, like the white collar or the short neck. Under these conditions, individuals with the most... I'm sorry, forget about the short neck right now. It's not stabilizing selection, the short neck. I will tell you what it is. Under this condition, individuals with the most common trait are the best adapted, while individuals who differ from the common form are poorly adapted. As a result, stabilizing selection maintains the existing population frequencies of common traits while selecting against all other trait variations. And I want you to remember each type, each kind of selection through diagrams. So, in order to say all that stuff and understand that stuff, because you see the questions are multiple choice, so they will not ask you what is stabilizing selection, you will need to say all that. You need to have understood all this in order to answer the IMAT questions. So, when you think about stabilizing selection, think about that. The population was like that before, but after selection occurred, the population got like that. What do we see? That the extremes have become extinct, and we've got what? The population around the common is very, very high. Okay, now let's move on with directional selection, this here. Let's see what that is. It favors traits that are at one extreme of a range of traits. This is the long neck, okay? There were, you see, there was the initial population. There were here long-necked giraffes and here short-necked giraffes. Over time, you see, it has shifted. The population has shifted toward the long-necked giraffes. This is directional selection. Okay. If directional selection continues for many generations, favored traits become more and more extreme, leading to distinct changes in the allele frequencies of the population. I want to give you now two examples. First, oh my god, I will never say this word correctly. Insecticide resistance occurs as a result of directional selection. Because traits of individuals vary in a population, some individuals may possess some degree of resistance to the insecticide. These few individuals survive and produce offspring, most of whom will inherit the insecticide-resistant trait. After several generations of directional selection, the population will consist of nearly all insecticide-resistant individuals. The peppered moth now is another example, and it provides an example of directional selection of moth color from a light, as you can see here, to a dark color. Before the Industrial Revolution, the light form of the moth was well camouflaged among the light-colored lichens that grew on tree barks around London. Since color variation is known to exist in other moths, the dark form of the moth probably existed but was never observed because it was so easily spotted and eaten by predator birds. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, soot killed the pollution-sensitive lichens, exposing the dark tree bark below. As a result, the dark form of the moth became the better camouflage of the two forms and increased in frequency. 100 years after the first dark moth was discovered in 1848, 90% of the moths were dark-colored. Meanwhile, the light form of moth continued to dominate populations in unpolluted areas outside London. The selection of dark-colored melanic varieties in various species of moths as a result of industrial pollution is called industrial melanism. Okay, and now let's go and see disruptive selection. It occurs when the environment favors extreme or unusual traits while selecting against the common traits. In the wild, this is an example now. In the wild, many species of weeds occur in a range of heights, but tall forms predominate. Because of disruptive selection, however, only very short forms of the same weeds occur in lawns. On lawns, short weeds are selectively advantageous because they escape mowing. Weeds in the wild are primarily tall because tallness makes them better competitors for sunlight. So, here we can see the short weeds, here the high weeds, and this occurs in lawns and this occurs in the wild. The mean is selected against. And last but not least is sexual selection. It's the differential mating of males in a population and sometimes females. Since females, now I want you to listen to me very carefully because this is a bit tricky and difficult in my opinion. You see, females usually make a greater energy investment into producing offspring than males. So they can increase their fitness. Fitness is what? Do you remember? The relative ability to survive and leave offspring. So they can increase their fitness by increasing the quality of their offspring by choosing superior males. Males, on the other hand, contribute little energy to the production of offspring and thus increase their fitness by maximizing the quantity of offspring produced. So, the females increase their fitness by increasing the quality of the offspring by choosing superior males, while males increase their fitness by maximizing the quantity of offspring produced. Thus, traits like physical qualities or behaviors that allow males to increase their mating frequency have a selective advantage and as a result increase in frequency within the population. This leads to two kinds of sexual selection as follows: male competition and female choice. Male competition leads to contests of strength that award mating opportunities to the strongest males. The evolution of antlers, horns, and large stature or musculature are examples of this kind of sexual selection. Like this funny picture. It's not funny, it's actually what happens. Okay, I will just go on. Female choice leads to traits or behaviors in males that are attractive to females. For instance, colorful bird plumage, the peacock's tail, is an extreme example, or elaborate mating behaviors are example. Sexual selection often leads to sexual dimorphism or dimorphism, differences in the appearance of males and females. When this occurs, sexual selection is a form of disruptive selection. And this is not a kind of natural selection, this is a kind of selection. It's artificial selection. What is that? It is a form of directional selection carried out by humans when they sow seed or breed animals that possess desirable traits. Since it is carried out by humans, it is not natural selection, but is given here for comparison. The various breeds of dogs have originated as a result of humans breeding animals with specific desirable traits. Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower have all originated from a single species of wild mustard after artificial selection of offspring possessing specific traits. Now, we said that there are sources of variation. We talked about that in the previous videos. Now we're going to look at the causes of changes in allele frequency. First of all, natural selection, which is the increase or decrease in allele frequency due to the impact of the environment. But there are other, first of all, and before I talk about that, do you remember the changes in allele frequency, what is called evolution? So we're going to see causes of evolution. One cause is natural selection indeed. Another one is mutations. They introduce new alleles that may provide a selective advantage. In general, however, most mutations are deleterious or harmful. Then we've got gene flow. And when we say flow, we mean from location to location. Gene flow describes the introduction or removal of alleles from the population when individuals leave emigration or enter immigration the population. Now, then we've got genetic drift. It's a random increase or decrease of alleles. In other words, some alleles may increase or decrease for no other reason than by chance. You see, when populations are small, usually fewer than 100 individuals, the effect of genetic drift can be very strong and can dramatically influence evolution. An analogy of genetic drift can be made with the chance associated with flipping a coin. You see, if a coin is flipped 100 times, the number of heads obtained would approach the accepted probability of half, 50%. However, if the coin is flipped only 5 times, analogous to a small population, one may obtain by chance all tails. Similarly, gene frequencies, and especially in small populations, may change by chance. We've got two special kinds of genetic drifts that are commonly observed, and I will just talk about it. I don't think you should know any of that. First, we've got the founder effect, which occurs when allele frequencies in a group of migrating individuals are by chance not the same as that of their population of origin. For example, one of the founding members of the small group of Germans that began the Amish community in Pennsylvania possessed an allele for polydactylism, more than 5 fingers or toes on a limb. After 200 years of reproductive isolation, the number of cases of this trait among 8,000 Amish exceed the number of cases occurring in the remaining world's population. Another example is a bottleneck occurs when the population undergoes a dramatic decrease in size. Regardless of the cause of the bottleneck, natural catastrophe, predation, and disease, for example, the small population that results becomes severely vulnerable to genetic drift. Destructive geological or meteorological events such as floods, volcano eruptions, and ice ages have created bottlenecks for many populations of plants and animals. And last, we've got non-random mating. What is that? It occurs when individuals choose mates based upon their particular traits. For example, they may always choose mates with traits similar to their own or traits different from their own. Non-random mating also occurs when mates choose only nearby individuals. In all of these cases, mate selection is not random and only the alleles possessed by the mating individuals are passed to the next generation. Okay. And last in this video and closing the inheritance and environments topic of biology is genetic equilibrium. When the allele frequencies in a population remain constant from generation to generation, the population is said to be in genetic equilibrium or Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. At genetic equilibrium, there is no evolution. I repeat, there is no evolution. So, in order for equilibrium to occur, the factors that normally change gene frequencies do not occur. So all that we said here is a no right now. So all of this must not occur in order to have the genetic equilibrium. So, first of all traits are selective neutral, no natural selection. Mutations do not occur. The population must be isolated from other populations, no gene flow. The population is large, no genetic drift, and mating is random. And now let's see what is that. It says that genetic equilibrium is determined by evaluating the following values: allele frequencies for each allele. So let's say I got 2 alleles, one dominant, one recessive, that determine 2 different traits. The frequency for this allele, let's say it's 0.001, 8, and this one is 0.2. The frequency for the allele A is called P, and the frequency for the allele A small is called Q. P and Q must equal 1. Then we've got the frequency of homozygotes. P squared is A. What is the frequency of homozygotes? 0.64. The value of P squared. And what is the frequency of heterozygotes, of homozygotes in the recessive gene? Again, A squared, Q squared, which is 0.04. And then we've got the frequency of heterozygotes. It's 2pq, which would in that case equals 2 times 0.8, 0.2, 2 times 1.6, which is 3.2. No, 0.32. Okay, and this is it. 0.32 plus 0.04 plus 0.64. Yes. Okay. Now let's see an example making the calculations. A plant population consists of 84% plants with red flowers and 60% with white flowers. Assume that the red allele R capital is dominant and the white allele R small is recessive. The value of 60% is the Q squared. Now, why red flowers, the 84% is RR plus RR, therefore P squared plus 2PQ. This is 0.84. From this, I can calculate the Q. It's the square root, so it's 0.4. And since I know the Q from this equation, I can calculate the P. P is 0.6. And now I can calculate everything. We can determine the frequency of individuals with homozygous dominant and heterozygous condition. Now, for a reason that I can't understand, almost all books about biology have this, the Hardy-Weinberg equation. In my country, Greece, the Hardy-Weinberg we have never been taught about that in high school, and it's actually one of the most difficult parts one of the most easy parts in genetics, but it was on the first semester, the lesson of genetics and molecular biology, when we learned about the Hardy-Weinberg. So in my personal experience and personal opinion, I don't believe you should know that. But since all books have it, and they're high school books, I believe that I should talk you through that. Now this is all. I want to add that there is an option around here on your YouTube where you can, it says CC, you can enable subtitles. They are made by YouTube and they are not always correct, but they're mostly all of the times correct, and I believe they will help you in understanding what I'm saying. That's all. The next videos that I'm going to be upload are in the chemistry and in the topic of biology, anatomy and physiology. That's all I had to say for today. Good luck and study hard, guys, because this year the competition is really high and we're all nervous, I know that, but the only solution to our anxiety is studying. So focus on studying. Bye bye, guys.